5:14 a.m., June 9, 2026, Truro, Massachusetts. 22 federal agents moved in 2 lines through the pine trees, lining a dune road off Route 6. No streetlights, tide fog rolling in off the Atlantic. The weatherboard cottage ahead had been listed as a long-term family rental since November. No vehicles in the drive, curtains drawn at every window facing the road, plywood sheeting nailed across every window at the rear. The authorization call came at 5:12. Entry cleared. At 5:14, FBI hostage rescue team and Homeland Security investigations breached simultaneously at 2 points: front door, kitchen side entrance. 10 seconds from initiation to threshold. Inside, a back hallway. 3 interior doors, 2 of them open, 1 bolted shut from the outside. A surface mount bolt fitted to the exterior of the frame, the kind used on storage sheds and outbuildings. A wooden chair wedged under the handle from the corridor side. An agent called through the door. A voice responded. Dr. Lena Marin, 38 years old, senior immunology researcher at a Cambridge biotech laboratory, missing for 22 days. She had been sitting on the floor with her back against the far wall when the door came open. Retention. Checkpoint. 000 hook. Viewer dropped into raid moment. Question planted. How did a Cambridge scientist end up in a bolted Cape Cod room? This is the moment the threads converge. A bolted door, a plywood-covered window, a researcher on a concrete floor. To understand how a Cambridge researcher ended up in that room, you need to go back to May 18th and a LinkedIn message that looked exactly like a career opportunity. A retention. Checkpoint. 030 resolution tease. Framing the investigation arc. Promising an answer. May 18th, 2026. Cambridge, Massachusetts. 6:47 p.m. Dr. Lena Marin logged out of her research workstation and packed her bag. She led a unit focused on monoclonal antibody development at a biotech laboratory on the Kendall Square corridor. 4 years in the same position. Published work. A record of methodical rigor her colleagues mentioned repeatedly in interviews. She was careful. She verified things. She read documents before signing, which is what made the sequence that followed difficult, at first, to reconstruct. 3 weeks before she disappeared, Dr. Marin had accepted a LinkedIn connection from someone identified as Marcus Hale, principal consultant at ArcPoint Health Ventures. The ArcPoint profile had existed for approximately 6 months. It looked legit. Headquarters listed in Boston's Back Bay, 41 followers, a dozen professional posts. The photograph attached to the Hale profile showed a man in his mid-40s, professional appearance, neutral expression. Investigators later identified the photograph as stolen, lifted from the public Instagram account of a software executive in Austin, Texas, who had no connection to any of the events that followed. The message Hale sent to Dr. Marin's inbox was professional. ArcPoint was developing a private wellness application for high-net-worth clients across New England. They were seeking an immunology-credentialed professional to serve on a scientific advisory board. The pay was well above typical advisory rates. The initial meeting would be held at a working retreat property near Provincetown, described as a private consultation environment, off-site to protect pre-launch confidentiality. The address attached was a Provincetown P.O. box. Dr. Marin accepted the invitation and drove south from Cambridge the evening of May 18th. She told no one where she was going. Her phone went dark at 7:53 p.m., the last signal registered on a cell tower relay in Yarmouth, at the Mid-Cape. 2 days later, a Braintree Transit Authority parking officer flagged an abandoned vehicle at the Route 128 commuter rail lot. Gray Subaru Outback, keys in the ignition, registration to Lena Marin. The phone found inside had been wiped, factory reset, no recoverable data, no signs of struggle. The interior was clean, no note. Cambridge police filed a missing persons report within 6 hours. The FBI Boston field office opened a parallel inquiry within 24. The recruiter's LinkedIn profile was deleted within 48 hours of Dr. Marin's disappearance. The ArcPoint Health Ventures website was taken offline the same day. The email address associated with the meeting request, a professional domain account registered under the ArcPoint company name, returned an undeliverable error by day 3 of the investigation. Everything had been cleaned. The investigation moved through the standard sequence for a missing persons case involving a scrubbed digital trail, phone records, financial transactions from the 3 weeks preceding the disappearance, camera footage from every automated system on the route between the Cambridge lab and the Route 128 parking lot, turnpike overhead cameras, toll gantry reads, gas station forecourt systems, bank ATM lenses. The last confirmed image of Dr. Marin's vehicle appeared on a Route 3 southbound camera south of Braintree, headed toward the Cape at 7:21 p.m. on May 18th. After that, nothing. No plate reader hit. No second camera capture. The Yarmouth cell tower ping placed her on mid-Cape. That narrowed the geography to somewhere between several hundred and several thousand properties. Seasonal vacation rentals, working farms, off-season cottages, private family compounds. Most were empty in mid-May, before summer opened. For 14 days, no signal, no sighting, no confirmed direction. Then, on May 22nd, Dr. Marin's employer received a communication through an encrypted messaging platform. A ransom demand, $900,000, payment in cryptocurrency, to an account under no U.S. jurisdiction, a deadline of 10 days, no photograph of proof, no audio, no proof of life confirmation. The employer reported the demand to the FBI within 4 hours. The case was now classified as an active federal kidnapping with a financial extraction motive, which answered the question of what had happened to Lena Marin. It answered nothing about where she was. The investigation had a direction. It had no location. The operation that took Dr. Marin had not been improvised. Reconstructed later from digital forensics, financial records, and the contents of a handwritten ledger recovered from a property in Wellfleet, the network had been operating since at least October 2025, 8 months before the Truro raid. The model was specifically engineered for the professional class in high-value research and financial sectors. The mechanism: construct a credible-seeming professional identity on a platform where credential checks are informal and identity verification is essentially non-existent. Build the identity over months, not days. Post professional content. Generate followers at a pace consistent with organic growth. Establish the appearance of a track record. Then extend contact to a pre-selected target. The selection process was deliberate. Investigators, reviewing the Wellfleet ledger, identified criteria that appeared consistently across the target profiles. Advanced credentials in sectors with extractable ransom value. Professional profiles with limited personal social networks. Individuals whose disappearance might be initially interpreted as voluntary, a sudden relocation, a personal crisis. Positions that suggested access to either proprietary research data or financially capable institutions. And, critically, roles with a degree of professional independence, individuals whose schedules could accommodate a plausible off-site meeting without triggering immediate colleague concern. The shell company and recruiter persona would be constructed months in advance, long enough to survive casual scrutiny, not so long as to attract the sustained attention that might produce a formal verification inquiry. The ArcPoint Health Ventures profile had been registered with LinkedIn in October 2025. The website domain was purchased the same week. The email infrastructure was built through a third-party domain reseller under a non-existent company name registered to an address in a jurisdiction with minimal filing requirements. When a target accepted a meeting, the location was always the same category: a private rental property, remote enough to prevent incidental contact, with a documented cover identity in the rental system, a lease under a false company name that would survive a first-level check without triggering a deeper verification pull. Once contact was made at the location, the hold was established. Communications severed, device wiped or destroyed, vehicle moved, ransom demand transmitted through encrypted channels to the most financially leveraged party, employer, immediate family, framed to pressure a quiet private resolution rather than a protracted law enforcement investigation. The cell had, by the time of the Truro raid, attempted at least 5 approaches across New England. Dr. Marin was the only one who had been held. What's most surprising about this case isn't the sophistication of the digital construction. Similar identity fabrication models appear in federal fraud case files going back years. What's surprising is how long the pattern ran undetected across 5 potential targets in 3 states before a single reported flag connected them. Checkpoint. 4 o'clock stakes bend. Network scope recasts the investigation. Viewer now understands the full scale. The investigation was comprehensive. The geography was vast. For 29 days after the ransom demand arrived, no confirmed location, no cell signal, no financial trace. Then a water utility technician in Barnstable County sat down to write his shift log. June 2, 2026. Cape Cod. He was on a routine check of vacant properties, comparing meter readings against usage records to spot billing errors or unauthorized occupancy. Not investigative work. An administrative task he did dozens of times each shift. At 11:41 a.m., he reached a weatherboard cottage on a dune road in Truro. The property appeared in the county system as vacant since October 2025. The surrounding houses on the road were empty. Early June, before the season peak. No vehicles in the drive. Curtains drawn at the front. No visible indication of occupancy. He read the meter. The draw was inconsistent with vacancy. Not dramatically, but consistently, and on a fixed pattern. The records showed regular low-volume water use, logged in the county's automated reading system between 2:40 and 3:10 a.m. on consecutive nights, going back approximately 3 weeks. The volume was consistent with a single plumbing fixture cycling on a deliberate overnight schedule, timed, recurring, every night within the same 30-minute window. He flagged it in his shift log, anomalous draw on a property marked vacant. Before completing the route, he stopped to speak with a resident on an adjacent road about road conditions near a stretch that showed recent water main work. In conversation, he mentioned the flagged cottage. The neighbor told him the property had been quietly rented to a family since early spring, but she had never seen anyone outside. No vehicles during the day, no children, no seasonal activity. She had assumed they kept unusual hours. 2 data points: shift log flag, neighbor report. No visible daytime occupancy on a property, drawing water every night at 2:40 a.m. He called the rental management company for the property. The company confirmed a lease was in place, but could not confirm current tenant presence. The contact information for the lease signatory, a company name, produced no searchable result in a public business registry. He filed his notes. End of shift. The referral generated by the county's property verification system was marked low priority. It sat in a queue. 7 days later, an automated sorting algorithm, modified 18 months earlier as part of a utility fraud prevention initiative, cross-tagged it as a possible unauthorized occupancy flag and pushed it to a regional incident monitoring system. 7 days after the initial flag, that tagged referral appeared in an FBI Boston field office automated cross-reference query. Special Agent Sarah Vashti had been assigned the Marin case as lead investigative analyst 3 weeks earlier. Her approach had involved systematic cross-referencing of any off-season or anomalous use property flag across Barnstable, Dukes, and Nantucket counties. The geographic zone consistent with the last confirmed cell tower signal from Dr. Marin's device. Thousands of properties, hundreds of flags, the vast majority irrelevant. The Truro flag stood out for 3 reasons. First, the usage timing. A single fixture running between 2:40 and 3:10 a.m., consistently, for 22 consecutive nights, beginning approximately 3 weeks before the inquiry date. Not a burst pipe, not a seasonal system test, a pattern consistent with a controlled overnight schedule. Fixed, repeating. Second, the lease. The rental record for the property showed a short-term lease signed in early April under a company name that returned no result in the Massachusetts Secretary of State's Business Registry, the federal EIN database, or any public commercial filing system. The signatory email address had been created 11 days before the lease was executed. Third, the Provincetown postal routing. Vashti cross-referenced the management company's lease records against address infrastructure associated with the Marin investigation. The Provincetown P.O. box cited in the Arc Point meeting request, the address Marcus Hale had included in his pitch to Dr. Marin, was registered under a postal routing code that overlapped with the sector covering the Truro Cottage's Dune Road location. Not conclusive, circumstantial. But the combination, anomalous nocturnal water draw, fraudulent lease, postal proximity to a confirmed element of the network's contact infrastructure, was sufficient to escalate from database review to physical surveillance. Vashti flagged the file for immediate surveillance within 36 hours of the initial cross-reference match. I spent time going through the case files on this investigation, and one detail kept nagging at me. In a 22-day inquiry that reviewed thousands of property records and hundreds of digital flags, the Truro cottage was surfaced by an analyst reviewing a plumber's logbook notation, not a wiretap, not a cryptocurrency wallet trace, not a digital forensic breakthrough, a shift note on a clipboard, filed low priority, queued for 7 days, sorted by an algorithm that had been modified a year and a half earlier for an unrelated purpose. A 2-minute administrative task, a name flagged in a routing queue. The difference between found and not found. The surveillance operation established at the Truro property was designed to produce confirmation without creating exposure. A fixed optical surveillance unit was placed on a neighboring vacant summer property under a legal authority access agreement. 2 cameras, one covering the side door and kitchen entrance, one covering the approach road. A drone pass was authorized for overnight hours under a Federal Aviation Authority waiver, running at 1:15 a.m., timed to fall outside the window when the water draw pattern suggested the occupants might be active. 48 hours of surveillance produced the following confirmed intelligence. 3 individuals, 2 males and 1 female. All 3 entered and exited exclusively through the kitchen side entrance. Never the front door, never in daylight. Movement was quick, covered at the face during exterior exposure, and purposive, in and out without visible interaction with the road or surrounding properties. Over 2 separate evenings, one of the male subjects transported equipment through the side door, a carrying case, and a secondary rectangular unit. The profile was consistent with a satellite uplink terminal and an auxiliary communications device. No visual confirmation of Dr. Marin. No window access to the cottage interior, all rear-facing windows plywood covered, all front windows curtained. The evidence package assembled for the federal warrant application contained the utility anomaly and shift log, the fraudulent lease and company non-existence documentation, the postal cross-reference to the network's Provincetown infrastructure, and one additional element that had been quietly sitting in an unconnected police file for 5 weeks. A Worcester, Massachusetts accountant named David Ferreira had received a LinkedIn approach in late March, a connection request from a profile called Hale Consulting Group, similar language to ArcPoint, similar structure, a mid-Cape meeting invitation. Ferreira had declined. He had screenshotted the message and preserved it. He had filed a report with Worcester Police in late April, concerned after seeing a regional news item about professional targeting schemes. The report had been filed locally and not escalated. Vashti's team found it during a manual review of open fraud reports across eastern Massachusetts. Side-by-side linguistic analysis of the message sent to Ferreira and the message sent to Dr. Marin returned a 92% pattern match on sentence construction, capitalization, word frequency, and formatting conventions. Same origin, same authoring approach, different shell name, same underlying network. That match gave prosecutors the argument that the Truro property was connected to the same operation that had taken Dr. Marin. The warrant was sealed on the evening of June 7th at 10:46 p.m. The breach was scheduled for June 9th at 5:14 a.m. A morning low-tide window minimizing ambient traffic on the Dune Road, limiting the operational footprint visible from Route 6. Subscribe. The breach, what agents found inside, and how the scope of the operation changed in the hours that followed are in the next section. Retention. Checkpoint. EBSH 50% mid-roll. CTA. Tied to promise of raid revelations. Tied. Between the warrant seal and the planned entry window, a parallel financial intelligence thread produced a second address. 3 miles south of the Truro cottage, in Wellfleet, a short-term rental registered under a different shell company name had been executing what financial forensics later identified as coordination payments. Cash transfers, each under $5,000, sent at irregular intervals to a series of prepaid payment instruments. The Wellfleet property's wireless network appeared in cell tower data as a consistent source for encrypted message traffic routed through the same Eastern European relay used in the Marin ransom demand communication. 2 properties, 1 holding site, 1 coordination point. The Wellfleet connection surfaced 31 hours before the planned Truro entry. The operational scope doubled in real time. FBI HRT at Truro, HSI at Wellfleet. Simultaneous breach, coordinated down to the minute. This is the part that most post-incident briefings get wrong. Investigators had not, by the morning of June 9th, fully mapped the network they were targeting. The Wellfleet property was added to the operation inside a 36-hour window. The decision to expand to 2 simultaneous locations, and to do so without extending the breach window or risking intelligence leakage through additional planning cycles, was made by the operation commander within 12 hours of the Wellfleet intelligence arriving. Here's what this tells us about how federal operations actually work. The clean, comprehensive reconstructions released afterward are retrospective. In real time, agents move with incomplete maps. They plan for what they know and improvise against what they don't. The Truro operation ran on a convergence of circumstantial indicators, a utility technician's logbook, and a linguistically matched screenshot that had been sitting in a local police file, unescalated, for 5 weeks. The communications hardware recovered from the Truro cottage would later show encrypted contact with at least 2 additional IP addresses in the continental United States, neither of which mapped to the Wellfleet property. Those addresses were under active federal investigation as of the date of the raid. The full scope of what they connect to remains sealed under court order as of the most recent public filing. The network extended beyond Cape Cod. How far beyond is not publicly known. By June 8th, the case had moved significantly above the Boston field office's immediate chain. HSI involvement alongside FBI HRT indicated the operation had been flagged under multiple federal jurisdictional categories: kidnapping for ransom, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and potential facilitation charges that fell under DHS statutory authority. 6 federal agencies had active interests by the time the warrant was sealed: FBI, HSI, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Massachusetts, the Southern District of New Hampshire, relevant because one potential network target, a pharmaceutical regulatory executive, was based in Portsmouth, the Rhode Island U.S. Attorney's Office, and the Department of Justice Criminal Division. The confirmed target pool, beyond Dr. Marin, included the Worcester accountant Ferreira, who had declined and reported the approach, the pharmaceutical executive in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and 2 civil engineers employed by a federal defense contractor in Providence, Rhode Island. At least 3 of the 4 had received LinkedIn contact from shell profiles linked to the Hale network. One of the Providence engineers had accepted an initial meeting invitation and then canceled, citing a scheduling conflict. None had been held. Dr. Marin had been held for 22 days. Here's a take that'll probably draw some pushback. The failure in this case wasn't the investigation that followed May 18th. Investigators found a scientist held in a sealed room using a meter reading and a screenshotted message. That is genuinely impressive work, under genuinely difficult geographic conditions. The failure was the 8 months prior. 4 professionals across 3 states were contacted by a network operating with an identifiable pattern. Same platform, same phrasing, same Provincetown P.O. Box infrastructure, same meeting format. Reports landed in local police files and were not escalated. A centralized, searchable professional targeting incident database, one that doesn't currently exist in a standardized federal form, capable of cross-jurisdictional pattern matching, might have broken this network in weeks instead of months. The Marin case will likely accelerate conversations about that gap. Whether those conversations produce actual infrastructure is a different question. Would you have connected those reports across 3 states, 6 months, and 5 separate local police filing systems? Drop your answer in the comments. We read every one. The final entry authorization for June 9th required 1 command-level clearance call at 3:48 a.m. The operation commander reviewed the Truro surveillance package for what one agent later described in a deposition as the 12th time in 6 hours. The drone pass completed at 1:15 a.m. had confirmed 3 individuals inside. No new movement detected. All lights off throughout the property. The water draw logged between 2:40 and 3:10 a.m. had not occurred, the first missed draw in 22 consecutive nights. The complication that had run through the final planning phase was straightforward. No direct visual or audio confirmation that Dr. Marin was inside the cottage. The case for her presence was built from layered inference: the utility pattern, the fraudulent lease, the Provincetown postal match, the linguistic fingerprint, the network's operational model. Every available indicator converged on the property. Nothing confirmed a specific individual. There is a passage in the operational brief from the early hours of June 9th, recoverable in the federal court filings, that is clinical in the way only official documents about human stakes can be: entry proceeds on available evidence. Contingency protocols apply if primary subject is not located at target property. Contingency protocols, meaning, if Dr. Marin was not found inside, the 3 arrested individuals would face a more complex prosecution, absent a primary witness in the initial arrest record. The network, wherever else it extended, would be alerted within hours of the first arrests. The operational window for any secondary location would close permanently. The entry decision was not made on certainty. It was made on the convergence of available evidence against the elapsed timeline. One detail that stayed with me in the case files: the plywood boards over the rear windows of the Truro cottage appeared in the utility technician's original shift log notation. He had observed the back of the property during his meter audit and noted rear windows covered. The drone footage taken 5 days later showed the plywood unchanged. Same panels, same nailing pattern, consistent across the entire surveillance period. In the middle of June, on Cape Cod, at 5:11 a.m., during the final pre-entry approach, an agent running close access reconnaissance on the kitchen side entrance identified a secondary lock bar, a steel surface mount mechanism, not visible in prior surveillance angles, not present in the original building schematic, fitted to the exterior of the doorframe. An obstacle added after the property came under network control, identified at close range, 3 minutes before the breach window. The entry sequence was adjusted on the ground. The synchronized window held. Retention. Checkpoint. MEHE. 21 Mind. Pre-raid cliffhanger. Urgency. 5:14 a.m. June 9th, 2026. Truro, Massachusetts. 2 teams, 2 doors. Simultaneous authorization transmitted. The front door team of 6 agents breached first, deliberately drawing attention and movement toward the main corridor. The kitchen side team, 4 agents, moved on the secondary entrance at the same moment. The steel lock bar was defeated in under 8 seconds using a manual override tool carried by the lead breach agent. The 3 individuals inside the cottage were located in the central living area. 2 males, subsequently identified as 31 and 44 years of age. 1 female, 37. All present, all non-resistant at the moment of breach. The 31-year-old male moved toward a bag near the kitchen counter. He was controlled before he reached it. Inside the bag, a laptop, 2 prepaid mobile phones, and a document folder containing printed financial transfer records, and what appeared to be a partial target profile sheet for a name that investigators had not previously encountered in the case file. That name, and that partial profile, would become one of the open threads in the federal case. Back hallway, 3 doors, 2 open, 1 bolted. The surface mount bolt on the 3rd door was a simple mechanism. The chair wedged from the corridor side added resistance but no technical complexity. Agents called through the panel. A voice answered from inside. Dr. Lena Marin was found seated on the floor of the rear bedroom, back against the far wall. The room had been modified for sustained occupancy without voluntary egress. Windows covered with plywood sheeting, nailed from outside. Standard hollow core interior door, retrofitted with external locking hardware. Inside, a cot, a portable toilet, a supply of packaged food, and bottles of water sufficient for several additional days. The overhead light fixture had been stripped of its bulb. She had been in that room for 22 days. She was transported under a restricted access protocol to Cape Cod Hospital in Hyannis. The intake nurse who processed her initial medical workup told federal investigators later that Dr. Marin's physical presentation was consistent with someone who hadn't been outside in 3 weeks. She was described as coherent, oriented to person and place, and asking specific questions about the status of the investigation before receiving any medical treatment. 22 days. In Wellfleet, 3 miles south, the HSI team executed entry at 5:14 a.m. to the second. 2 additional male subjects, both in their 30s, were arrested at the coordination property. The interior contained a laptop array, sessions still active at the time of entry, and a handwritten ledger recovered from a kitchen drawer. 4 pages, multiple columns, target names, professional institutions, contact timelines, and status notations in a consistent shorthand. 3 of the names in the ledger were individuals previously identified by the Marin investigation as potential network targets. The 4th had no existing connection to any open federal case at the time of recovery. At 11:42 a.m. that morning, a 4th suspect was apprehended at Logan International Airport in Boston. He was attempting to board a one-way flight to Lisbon, Portugal, under a secondary identity document. HSI agents made the arrest at the departure gate. 4 arrests in under 17 hours. The cottage was secured. The Wellfleet property sealed as an evidence site. Dr. Marin in a hospital. 4 suspects in federal custody pending arraignment. What the operation had not yet resolved: the 2 encrypted IP contact addresses recovered from the Truro hardware, mapping to U.S. locations outside Cape Cod, both still active. The partial profile name found in the kitchen bag, and the full financial architecture connecting the network's coordination payments to whatever lay upstream of the Wellfleet property. The raid was over. The network, or at least a portion of it, was not. The federal indictment handed down on June 23, 2026, named 5 defendants. The 4 arrested across Truro, Wellfleet, and Logan Airport, plus a 5th individual identified as the network's financial coordinator, taken into custody on June 19th from a location in the Mid-Atlantic region. That individual's name is sealed in the public docket pending additional proceedings. Charges included kidnapping for ransom, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and multiple counts under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations statute. The RICO designation signals prosecutorial intent to argue this as a structured, ongoing criminal enterprise, not an isolated kidnapping for ransom incident. The cell had confirmed targeting activity against at least 5 New England professionals over 8 months. Dr. Marin was the only individual physically held. The 4 others had been contacted and assessed. 3 declined before reaching the physical meeting stage, and 1 canceled a confirmed meeting date citing a scheduling conflict. A 6th approach, directed at a financial attorney in Hartford, Connecticut, was in active preparation at the time of the Truro arrest. That individual was contacted by the FBI on June 9th, within hours of the raid. Financial forensics traced more than $1.4 million in movement through the cryptocurrency wallets associated with the network, including the $900,000 ransom demand transmitted to Dr. Marin's employer, which was